Okay.
All right, I appreciate your time today, Glyn Rhodes. Now, obviously, you're a very well-known trainer in British boxing. Can you tell me the role of a trainer and what it takes to become recognised as a quality trainer?
Well, I can only tell you from my own experience. There's different roles as a trainer. There's your mother, father, psychologist, psychiatrist, everything. You've got to be a little bit of everything. I'm not one of these guys who train many people that I've not actually brought through from the beginning, if you know what I mean. Most of my kids have come through the gym, joining as a 11-year-old amateur and then progress through the amateurs and then go on to box pro. And that's my role is at our gym. There are other trainers who do it slightly different. Some trainers seem to get kids who are already good. But myself personally, I'm one of these trainers who likes to bring kids through from the amateurs, all the way through, which we've done on many occasions.
I agree. I think it's very difficult to take a kid from scratch. However, it's probably more satisfying. Who do you feel are some of the best fighters you've worked with?
Oh, I've worked with some great fighters, but most of the great fighters that I've worked with have not come through my system. The best fighter that I ever worked with was obviously Errol Graham. Not only worked with him, but trained alongside him as an amateur and a pro. I've told this story many times. I was fortunate enough to box on Errol Graham's undercards on many occasions in Sheffield. And towards the end of his career, I was very fortunate as a young trainer. I think I was about 33, and Errol decided to make a comeback, and I ended up training Errol for his last few fights. Although I must put my hands up and say that I was one of the people who advised him to retire, and he went on to box and beat Vinny Pazienza, Chris Johnson, and then box for the world title against Charles Brewer in Atlantic City. So I was one of the first people to put my hands up and say, on that occasion, I was wrong. So as one of the all-time British middleweights, one of the greatest middleweights to never win a world title, it's got to be Errol Graham. And I've been very, very fortunate to work with him. Another guy I worked with, who again I owe an awful amount to, is Clinton Woods. Clinton Woods was one of these guys. He did it the old way, he won the area title, the British title, the Commonwealth title, the European title, then went on to box for the world title. So I'm very fortunate to train Clinton in his early career when he boxed not too far from here at a place called Pine Grove Country Club. I trained him for a couple of fights there, and he won the area title. And then I was fortunate enough to train him towards the end of his career when his last fight was against the kid in Florida. So it's been a great journey for me, and I always use Clinton as an example. What Clinton lacked in ability, he made up for in big heart, good chin, trained hard. We're one of these guys, we've heard it all before. First in the gym, last out. It was one of them. So I often use Clinton as an example as to how a professional boxer should be. Like I said, you've got to have a big heart, and Clinton had one of the biggest hearts in the game. So I thank Clinton for that, because, like I said, I had some great times with Clinton. British title against British and Commonwealth against Mark Baker. Yeah. The ironic thing as well is, as most people know, I'm from the Brennan Ingle gym from many years ago, and Clinton, the second fight I worked with Clinton, it was for the area title against a guy from the Ingles gym, Darren Littlewood, which, a great fight here in Sheffield. Clinton won that. That was his first title, and then went on, to box some great fights. It's some tremendous fights. And not only that, he was one of the biggest ticket sellers we've had here in Sheffield. Some of the fights that Clinton fought in Sheffield, the arenas were packed out. It was brilliant. Same as I always say about Errol Graham. Before Errol Graham came along, there was no boxing in Sheffield. Errol came along and he put Sheffield on the boxing map. So I'd say Errol Graham and Clinton, and then you got Richie Wenton as well. Richie Wenton, I trained Richie Wenton, the first ever fighter to go on to win the super bantamweight title against Bradley Stone. Very sad outcome to that fight, which Richie won. Brilliant fight. But then sadly, a couple of days after Bradley, passed away. So, and I also got many memories with Richie. British, Commonwealth, and world title against the one and only Marco Antonio Barrera in Atlantic City. So that journey with Richie has also been, it's been a great journey. To go from a kid boxing, although Richie was from Liverpool, the first time I trained him was in a place called Columpton, which is in Devon, where we were living at the time. And so, to go on to box Marco Antonio Barrera in Atlantic City from boxing, good fighter, Richard, very, very good fighter, very big for his weight. And so was his brother, got a brother called Nigel Wenton, also a great fighter. So they're probably the most notable names that I've worked with. Paul Sulky Jones, a good friend of mine, who was also WBO world champion, trained and alongside Paul, and had some great times with Paul over the years. Spent a short time in New Jersey with Paul, training. I'd retired then, I was training Paul. That was a brilliant trip. So they're the guys that are probably up there, that the household names that people would remember. But the thing that I'm most proud about myself is the guys, you just train from start. I don't want to name the guys in the gym because I'll probably forget some, but I've got so many guys that have joined us as a raw novice and then gone on to be, win titles. The most recent being Tommy Frank, who just won the British flyweight title. So I've had a good time in boxing. I've got nothing bad to say about boxing.
That's a fascinating answer. And you mentioned Errol Graham. Obviously, he was unfortunate. You had people like Mike McCallum, Julian Jackson in that era. He was unlucky with the Julian Jackson fight. I feel, obviously he was winning. But, this is boxing. It can end up with one punch.
Well, I always say, Errol
Graham,
one of the greatest British fighters to never win a world title. In every attempt at the world title that Errol had, he was just, I know you could say this, just so unlucky against Julian Jackson, against Mike McCallum, against Charles Brewer. He was on the verge of being on this close of beating them all. And then, we all know what happened. And then it's really sad because although I'm a friend of Errol's and I've been friends with him since we were 16, and I'm not just being biased to what it just wasn't in the stars for Errol to be world champion. So close against Mike McCallum, who people regard as one of the all-time greats, and Errol came this close to beating him. And then Julian Jackson, the fight everybody talks about when Errol got knocked out, the referee was going to stop the fight in the next round. And then Charles Brewer, I think Errol were going on almost 40-year-old, he was 38, 39-year-old, put Bro down early. That was the fight in Atlantic City on the card to Lennox Lewis and Shannon Briggs. So, again, it just wasn't meant to be for Errol Graham to be world champion. Just very, very, one of the most gifted fighters to come from these shows, but also one of the most unluckiest, so close every time.
I agree with you. Obviously, you've got a lot of experience there, so your opinion is very valid. Why do you think fighters are different these days? Because they don't seem to be as well developed as fighters from that era.
Well, I often say this, fighters these days, you've got social media. Social media can be a good thing. It can also be a bad thing. Back in the day when I was boxing at Brendan's, I'd go in the gym and Brendan said, right, you're boxing whenever, wherever. And I put my trust in Brendan. He's my manager, he's my trainer, and that was it. The problem I have now, I go to my guys in the gym and I tell them that they're boxing such a guy. what's the first thing they do? They go on BoxRec. They go on BoxRec and they scrutinise the guy's record, and then, you know, I've had parents ringing me up. You know, a few months ago, one of my guys who was a pro, he'll probably be watching this, but he rang me and said, "Who's he boxing?" So I told him the guy's name, and then shortly after, his dad rang me, his dad texted me and asked me again. He says, "What's the guy called that my son's boxing?" Blah blah blah. So I was a little bit pissed off because I know what had happened. He'd gone home, told his dad. So his dad texted me, and just for a joke, I put Carlos Monzon. So about 15 minutes later, I got a text back, laughing faces, ha 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 ha. So what he'd done, he rang me to ask me the guy's name. I put Carlos Monzon. He then went on BoxRec, realised who Carlos Monzon is, then realised that I was having a bit of a dig at him. And that's one of the problems you've got these days. Like I said, back in the day, you know, Brendan told me I was boxing. I didn't question it where I just put my trust in Brendan. Social media is a great thing, and it's also a bad thing. You know, another thing with social media, what the problem is these days, you know, back in the day, and I'm not one of these guys, back in my day, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, guys spend more time worrying about, you know, what colour shorts they're wearing and the dressing gown and sponsors' names on the T-shirts. And I get all that. But sometimes, you know, they're putting too much pressure on themselves by, you know, we had a kid in the gym not too long ago, only, you know, a pro, not had many fights, and they start getting illusions that they're actually better than what they are because, you know, they've been carefully matched and looked after. So again, social media it can be great, and it also can be a bad thing.
I mean, that's actually quite funny. You mentioned Carlos Monzon, one of the greatest middleweights of all time.
Oh, yes.
I don't know. I think Harry Greb's so underrated, but you know, you got Monzon, you got Robinson, you got who else would I say? Marvin Hagler.
Hagler, yeah. But the problem we've got, we can only look at Harry Greb's record on paper. You know, there's not, you know, whereas you look at Sugar Ray Robinson, you look at Carlos Monzon, you look at Marvin Hagler, you can actually go on YouTube and see these fights and then say, you know, compare this guy to that guy. You know, with people like Harry Greb, you know, there's not many, you know, you can't go on YouTube and watch him fight or whatever, but his record speaks for itself. You know, if you look at the amount of fights he had in this short period of time that he did, you know, and back in them days, and his knockout percentage and things like that, you know, he boxed and beat some guys. But it's just a shame that, you know, there's not many films of him actually in combat against anybody. So we can, you know, you can only compare people, you know, you can only, you know, everybody's talking about Rocky Marciano in this era. You can only fight who's around in that era. You know, I'm just saying Rocky Marciano, what a great fighter. You know, so you can only compare Rocky Marciano to the guys who were around in his era. You can only compare Muhammad Ali to the guys who were around in his era. And you can go on forever with these debates and arguments that Rocky Marciano would have beat Ali, and, you know, they did the computer fight and things like that. But going back to Harry Greb, you know, there's no fights of Harry Greb, but we can actually sit down and watch. But on his record, in the days that he did it, you know, a great fighter.
Well, okay, going back to the social media, I think the best way I can explain it, I've got a very logical way of explaining things. I sent you a video. I sparred Kell Brook last October. I don't know if you watched the video.
No.
I'll send it to you again. I messed around with Kell Brook. Like Dominic, I've known Dominic Ingle a long time. He knows I've got a YouTube channel. They let me jump in with him. Now you can watch it. You can gauge it for yourself. Look, basically, Kell Brook's just messing around with me. Yeah. Now, I landed a lucky right hand. Now, I'm not a professional fighter. I've had one amateur fight. I've had 6 white collar. I'm not too bad. I can run around really quick. But what I'm trying to say is that I landed one lucky right hand. It annoyed him. He started digging into me with body shots, and I couldn't really continue much longer. Now, I think it's a good question. I'm not talking out of any ego. As soon as he wanted to turn the pressure on, I wasn't able to much last longer. what I'm trying to say about a lot of fighters, that's what social media is. It's fantasy. But the problem
Yeah.
you have when you get carried away with what people say online and fans, but what happens when it comes to a fight? I'll give you a better example. Forget
So
me.
can I just
Sorry, please.
sorry, can I? So you got into spar with Kel, right? Who was former world champion, great fighter, you know, and you got in and you've run around with, and you probably tried to stick it on him,
I landed
which you know
one
is
luck. Yes, sorry.
one shot. But that's very disrespectful from you to do that to him. You know, for you to land one good shot on Kel, and then you probably annoyed him. So
Yeah.
then he started trying to fill you in, which is going to happen. You know, some guy gets in to spar with me, and he said, "Look, I've had a handful of fights. I've not," and you know, you get in and you spar and you take your time. But if that guy tries to stick it on me, you know, to make himself look good, what am I going to do? So
You're gonna
what
hit me
probably happened
back.
with you? You probably took liberties with trying to stick it on Kel with a big right hand. You probably felt good about that, right? But you know, it's slightly disrespectful to try and do that to Kel as a former world champion who's probably helping you, just taking his time until you stuck it on him.
You're right. Perfectly said.
Yeah.
I landed one lucky right hand. And yeah, he was very kind. He chose not to hit me with any headshots. Soon as
So
he
you
started, yeah, I'm
yes.
not. I know the difference between an actual spar and someone going easy on you. As soon as he
Yeah.
wanted to, he just finished me off. I
Yeah.
think that's what social media is. A lot of fighters, you're fighting people on short notice, or they're not the best fighters. But who's a good? It's like Wilder. Wilder's a good example. I respect him for what he's done, but he put so much effort into the costume, the entrances, and so
Yeah.
on. But then when it came to Fury, and I say it to his face, I don't think there's anything wrong with losing a fight. But when he lost to Fury, instead of just getting on and having another fight, you're coming out with all these excuses for social
Yeah.
media. I'm
Yeah.
like, but mate, listen,
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali lost fights. Muhammad Ali lost, he got on with it. And I think that's what a lot of fighters are missing. Like Dave Allen, when Dave Allen's gone through depression, but you shouldn't be talking to people online. You don't know who these people are. Talk to the people around you. So do you think
Yeah.
is this one of the problems with social media where fighters rely
Yeah,
on
that's
this?
the problem. But you know, in this world that we're in, social media, and like I said, we're probably at a time where there's never been so much accessibility to anything. You know, you want to know anything now, you can type it on YouTube and you've got it straight away. There's never been that kind of thing before in the world, has there? We're living in
Yeah.
an age now where people want to know something, bang, you can Google it, YouTube it. So, you know, it's a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing, you know, but people can take things out of context, you know, like texting, you know, you can text something and people read it and then read it the wrong way. But it's only the same as, you know, like you sparring and guys, you know, you've only got to look at this Jake Paul, you know, what he's doing. It's only, if social media wasn't around, this guy couldn't do half the things he's doing. It's just down to social media that he's able to do what he's doing.
No, I agree. That's one of the problems of it. And the other thing you mentioned that I think is a good thing to mention, when you talk about the parents getting involved, so I do different things in my life. I've joined the British Army, I work in construction. And obviously, when you go to work or when I'm in the army, you do as you're told by the people there. Your job is a boxing trainer. So you've been training people since before some of these fighters were born. I'm 31. So
Yeah,
when you get parents, I understand he's your son and you're concerned, but
yeah,
you're not a boxing trainer. It's not your job to be getting involved. If I was going to train fighters, which is not something I don't think it's for me, I wouldn't let the parents get involved because you're going to get emotionally involved, and I don't need you telling me to do telling me how to do my job. How do you deal with those sort of
but it's
problems?
hard. Hard. I understand as a parent, you're looking out for your kid, so I understand that. But if you bring your fighter to me, you know, you've got to have confidence in me. Look at my track record and what I've done in the past with kids. We had a kid box, an amateur kid box the other night. He's only had 4 fights, good little kid. He's only about 14 years old. The night before he boxed, I got a text from his dad saying, I don't think he should box. He's not very well. I just thought I'd let you know. He doesn't know I'm texting you, blah, blah, blah. I spoke to him in the gym. I said, how do you feel? He said, I feel all right. I said, well, I've had a text from your dad and he doesn't think you should box. Now, this is why you've got to look at it. If he'd have boxed and lost badly, his dad would have said to me, I told you yesterday, I sent you a text telling you he shouldn't have boxed. But what happened is he boxed brilliant. He gave the kid a standing count in the last round, so he boxed brilliant. So I never heard from the dad. So you've got to weigh up. I just wish people would, put the trust in me. When my son was younger, he used to do kung fu. I used to drop him off. It's not something that I like, or Wing Chun or some martial arts. I used to drop him off and I used to leave him. I could have stayed in the area where they train for once, but I thought all I'm doing by doing that is putting pressure on the coach. So I used to leave him, I'd drop him off and leave him. And, there's this guy's an experienced coach, trainer, whatever. I left him to do his job because I don't know anything about that. So I just wish a lot of parents would just, leave the kids alone, let them develop nice and steady, rather than putting pressure on them. A lot of these kids, they start boxing at 11, and hopefully, you never know, hopefully they might go on. But along the way, before they do anything, I've seen so many fighters come and drop by the wayside. They get a girlfriend, or they go out drinking. So much can change between them being an 11-year-old kid and being a professional, if they're good enough to turn professional. So me personally, I just wish, I know parents are only looking out for the kids, but sometimes you have to look at the guy who's looking after your kid and think, look, this guy knows what he's doing. His track record speaks for itself, as most of the guys do up and down the country who are training amateur boxers or pros. Just leave them to develop on their own. Don't put pressure on them. This kid who I'm on about, he only had 4 fights, and already you've got his dad on your case, saying he's not very well. So I don't know, it's a tricky one. I understand the parents are only looking out for the kids, but let's just leave the kids to develop at their own pace.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult one, and obviously, yeah, as a trainer, I guess you're going to get used to these things and you're going to learn how to deal with them. On a wider scale, what do you think are the biggest problems in boxing today?
Money. Yeah. Money, innit? It's always money. Most of the times when people fall out, it's over money. Guys leave you, or because, some guys, I've got a friend, he's got a building business, and he says to me, he's got joiners that work for him and they're on good wages, but if somebody down the road's got a building site and they offer him £1 more, they just leave and go to that. And so, I'm speaking professional boxing here. You've got these trainers who do it for less. The boxing board of control, it's 10% for a trainer, 25% for a manager. But, you've got some of these guys who are coming along who not been around, not got no experience. They'll tell a fighter that they'll do it for less, and off they go. And it's sad, really. So I think the biggest problem, it's great that there's so much money involved in boxing these days. That's a good thing. The sad thing is that, it ruins a lot of relationships between fighter and trainer, manager, whatever.
From what you just said, and obviously what I see happen in boxing these days, why are fighters so gullible to jump from team to team? If you look at a lot of the great fighters, most of them stuck with the same team for their entire career. Joe Louis, Ali, etc.
Yeah.
It's like, I can explain it very well. If you look at a lot of fighters, once they get money, they want the best of everything, the best cars, jewelry, clothes, travel. Yeah. But when it comes to trainers, a lot of them cut corners. You don't want to pay. What was his name? Golovkin. Abel Sanchez got you to this level, but then you don't want to pay him his 10% anymore. And he's not the only. And Abel Sanchez, he's like me. We're strong-minded people. And when he told Abel that, Abel wasn't going to take it. So, what's another good example? It's like Brendan Ingle and Nassim Hamed. Like
the exact same scenario as Brendan Winaz. When they started together, they agreed that Brendan was on, I don't know, whatever, 10% as trainer. Sorry, he was manager at first, I think, or was it Frank? Anyway, they started together. they agreed that Brendan was on 10%. Great. And Brendan always used to tell this story. If you start with me at the beginning, it's 10%. You can't move the goalpost towards the end, and then all of a sudden, you don't want to pay 10%. But what happened with Naz, he was happy to pay 10% at the beginning. As his career, flourished and he started earning more money, he then started saying, "Oh, hang on a minute, I don't want to pay you this amount," and it's sad. It's wrong. Yeah. Can I just take this call?
Oh yeah, let's go for it. Go for it.
Pete, can I call you back in a bit, pal? Go on. See you in a bit. Thank you. Yeah. So Brendan always tells his story about when he started with Naz, and then later on, they got a goalpost moved, and there was a fallout, and Naz went and trained with, I don't know, what's called
Emmanuel Stewart.
No, the guy who died. Oh God, I can't remember his name. Yeah, he ended up with Manny Stewart though. So yeah, again, if it's 10% at the beginning and me and you agree, or 5% or 1% or whatever percentage you agree on in the beginning, if that's what we agree on in the beginning, that's what it should be at the end. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's a shame because, but as I said, I mean, why are they so gullible? Why are they willing to go to people that are not the most experienced?
Well, what you've got to remember about a lot of boxers, like me, kids from the street, and they never had no money, and it's very rare you get a fighter coming from I'm not saying never, but it's hard for a guy who's had a privileged lifestyle, living at the top, to suddenly be a professional boxer. What did Marvin Hagler say? It's hard to get up and do your road work when you go to bed in silk pajamas. That's a perfect analogy. So a lot of kids, you've got to understand, these street kids, they come from, like myself, hanging around on street corners, and you're making a few quid. So they're not educated to understand money. Mike Tyson, perfect example. I think 5 years before he was world champion, they're on verge of getting locked up or something. So a lot of street kids, they're not educated as to what to do with the money, to save the money, invest the money, put the money away, pay the taxes and whatever. It's, history keeps repeating itself with fighters, from Joe Louis to Mike Tyson. You look down how many fighters end up broke, and it's sad. It's very, very sad. So what happens with a lot of fighters is somebody will tell them that they'll take less, and so what the fighter does, he thinks, well, you know what, pay this guy less, get the same deal. Obviously not the same deal. So pay somebody who's not as experienced as his coach and jump ship. It's sad. But we recently had a guy leave us. Strange. Been with us since we were an amateur, young kid, lovely, great kid. He was 6-0, won the area title, failed to make the weight on his last fight. I got the blame, but never at no point did he ever come to me and say, it's your fault, you should have done this or you should have done that. He just left and gone to another trainer. So he didn't even have the decency to ring me up and say, I'm not happy with you for whatever reason. I'm leaving, I'm going to another gym or whatever. I never ever spoke to him since the day we was in the gym when he failed to make the weight. And I thought, this is a kid that's been with us since he was 11-year-old amateur. Didn't even have the decency to ring me. You're not going to stop fighters leaving or whatever, or somebody else was in the ring. That's just what it is. But, I'm surprised that he didn't even have the decency to ring me and tell me that we were leaving. I had some whispers, and I thought, well, he'll probably ring and say, look, I'm not happy, I'm leaving, whatever. Never spoke to me. The only, although I heard whispers around the town, we live in Sheffield, which is like a small village. The guy we left to go with is a friend of mine, and he rang me, said, your fighter's come to see me, he's not happy, he's leaving. So even then, I thought, well, that was a nice thing for him to do. But I thought, at least, give me the respect to ring me up and say, look, thanks for everything. I'm not happy. I didn't make the weight, but it weren't my fault. You can't blame me for not making the weight. When I've been in the gym every day, he was £2 overweight earlier in the week. And then suddenly he fails to make the weight, and it's my fault. How's that work? I don't know. And even to this day, not a phone call, nothing. And we've seen each other in the. It's sad. Boxing's sad. That, you know, like look at Naz and Brendan. Look at Barry McGuigan, Barney Eastwood. The list goes on and on and on. So it's a sad state of affairs when that happens.
No, I mean, I think I'm a bright thinker, and I just think it's a sad part of human nature. With me, I'm very straightforward. I always tell people the truth, and I can understand it's disappointing for him to be with you that long and he won't even just to not just offer an explanation. I agree with you. My advice to you, for what it's worth, I wouldn't really. I mean, what can I say? I just sort of think
No, I'm
that
not.
I'm not saying you are.
No, I'm not upset because I've seen it. You know, it's happened before, and it'll happen again. But you know, you usually find out third hand. But because I've been with this kid from a long, long time ago, I would have appreciated to pick the phone up and just say, look, I'm not happy with you. We're drifting apart, whatever. But not even a phone call, not even from his parents, nothing. And like I said, we've seen each other. And he's sad, you know, if he, you know, like I say, I think he's about 21 years old now. He's been with us since he was about 7. So
Wow.
it's really, really sad. But, you know, we've been all over the world. And like I said, you can't blame me if I'm in the gym and you're in the gym, and then, you know, the day before the fight, you fail to make the weight. When earlier in the week your weight was fine, that's not my fault. So what fighters do, you know, they don't want to go, or I've made a mistake or whatever. So they blame somebody, they blame the trainer. What normally happens with a lot of fighters when they lose, they very rarely point to themselves, well, my fault not be. So I'm not that upset because it's happened before and it'll happen again. But I just would have thought, because I was so close to the kid growing up, and like I've been all, I'd have appreciated just to pick the phone up and say, look, I'm thinking of leaving or whatever. I wouldn't have tried to convince him otherwise, because once a guy makes his mind up to go,
Yeah.
you know, you're not going to keep him. And I always think what I always find as well is when guys leave, you know, it's very rare that they just leave and then go to another trainer. What I find generally happens in this game is they're not happy with you, or for whatever reason, so they'll go and try another gym, or they'll you know, go to a few gyms, and when they find one that they're happy with, then that's when they decide, you know what, and I don't come back. Or so there's only one guy. I'll tell you the guy's name. I'll I'm still friends with him. There's a guy called Clifton Mitchell.
Yeah, I know him.
You know Clifton from Nottingham.
Derby.
Sorry. He was training at my gym, and one day he rang me. He said, "Can I have a word?" Blah blah blah. Came to the gym. We had a chat. He shook my hand and he said, "I'm going to go to this other gym. Whatever." He says, "If it doesn't work out, can I come back?" So I respected Clifton for that. I respected him so much to actually shake my hand and say, "If it don't work out at this other gym, am I okay to come back?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Because he's done it the right way." He came, looked in my eye, shook my hand. He said, "Look, whatever." Shook my hand, said them words. "If it doesn't work out in this other gym, am I okay to come back?" So what he'd done, which I respected, he never burnt his bridges. So, you know, he went to this other gym and whatever. But of all the fighters that have left or gone to the gyms or whatever, Clifton's the one who springs to mind, who actually came to me, shook my hand and said, "Can I come back if it doesn't work out?" What I find with fighters, when they come to me, even the amateurs or pros, the first thing I say to them is, "Have you told your trainer?" Because I wouldn't like it done to me. You know, a guy rang me a couple of months ago, a good kid training in Sheffield, and he said, "I'm thinking of leaving my trainer." And I said, "Have you told him?" And he says, "No, I'm going to have a word with him." So I said to him, "Listen, before you start telling me, the best thing you can do is go and tell him." I says, "You know, I just, out of respect, tell him that you spoke to me or whatever." I didn't end up training the kid, and he never rang me back. So what I did is I rang his trainer and I said, I'm just letting you know that your guys rang me, and I'm just putting you straight that, you know, he's hawking himself round. And so I expect a call from him to say he's leaving. I just want you to hear it from me that he's rang me, but I'm not interested, but I don't want you to hear it from him. It's annoying when you hear it from a third party. Like I said, we've got a lot of gyms in Sheffield, got a lot of fighters. So when, you know, it's a village. So when you're hearing things from other gyms, or he's been here, or you're better off just going straight to the trainer and saying, look, I'm not happy, I'm leaving. And then you've done your job. That you've showed the trainer a bit of respect by going and facing him. You've manned up. You've looked him in his eye, face to face. You've shook his hand. But with the guy who I'm just talking about, he, like I said, not spoke to him. And we even actually sat at a show together, not together, but we were on the stage, and I waited for him to actually just speak and say. He never said a word. You know, I know it's awkward. It's awkward when you've got to tell your trainer that you're no longer happy or you want to go somewhere else. But what I do, if a kid's not happy, you know, you're better off just splitting up, because if the kid's not happy and you're not happy, you need to be happy training the kid, and he needs to be happy you training alongside. It's a bit like a marriage. You've got to be happy to be in the gym with somebody every day. Some days you're not. Some days you upset people. I had 2 fighters box at the weekend, and Saturday night. Monday they came in the gym, and I ripped a few stripes off them because they needed it. I thought to myself, well, maybe they won't come back on Tuesday. And guess what? They came back and cuddled and shook hands, and I said, "Are you still my friend?" Just said, "Yeah, everything's all right." So again, you respect that, but the way they boxed wasn't up to scratch through their own mistakes. So if I'd have just let it slide, that's not what a good trainer does. I'm not, although in the gym sometimes your mother, father, like I said, psychologist, psychiatrist, friend, whatever, there has to come a time every now and again where I'm not your friend, I'm your trainer, and I'm going to tell you things sometimes that you don't want to hear. And what I might tell you, you might not be happy hearing, but as a trainer, if I don't tell you the truth, I'm not being true to myself. So, I just like I said, these 2 kids, both of them came back in the gym, and we're happy, and off we go again. The show rolls on. So,
but the problem is that, as you're saying, from what I can see, with a lot of fighters, you don't get honesty. It's like there's 2 people I can name. If you look at Amir Khan and Anthony Joshua, I think Amir Khan's world-class fighter, lots of ability, but whenever you've seen him lose fights, and I've interviewed him before, I'd say it to his face, Amir Khan, you can see he's physically not the strongest. He hasn't got the best punch resistance, and there's nothing wrong with that. But whenever he loses a fight, instead of just accepting I haven't got the best punch resistance, he wants to blame the trainers. And it's the same thing with Joshua, the way he's reacted since losing to Usyk. To me, I just think Usyk's a more developed fighter than you. But it's like you're going from gym to gym to gym. You're trying to get everyone's opinion. I lost because of this, 100 other reasons. But you're not accepting the simple explanation. And I think it's weird with fighters. You seem to be getting these egos in boxing where it's always someone else's fault. That's the impression.
That's not just Anthony Joshua and Amir Khan, if that's your opinion. There's lots of fighters
Loads,
like that.
wow, yeah.
There's loads of fighters. When a guy wins, great. When he loses, it's a trainer's fault. There's another saying in boxing: if you want loyalty, buy a dog. I think Mickey Duff came out with that saying years ago. And I often see that quote getting thrown around: if you want loyalty, buy a dog. But in the 20 odd years that I've been doing this, 1993, I've got fighters who've stuck with me through thick and thin, and I can name them all, and they're still friends with me today. I've got lots of fighters that have stuck with me through good times, bad times. So when they say there's no loyalty in boxing, with some fighters there isn't. But I don't necessarily agree with that saying, if you want loyalty, buy a dog, because I've got so many fighters in my gym who have been unbelievable loyal. And
Yeah.
now I think there's about 3 of them who bring the kids to the gym to train. You know, so
Oh,
what
wow.
a great testament. What, you know, off the top of my head, you know, one of the guys is a guy called Jez Wilson. He was great, good middleweight. He boxed John Ryder, I think, for the British title. He was area champion, good fighter, big ticket seller. John Fuchs. I'm going to miss somebody like Carlisle. These are guys that I'm still in touch with who have been 100% loyal, who could have gone somewhere else, who first time they lost could have blamed me, but they didn't. They stuck with me. In fact, funnily enough, we're going out this Saturday, and some of the guys who are going out is Jez Wilson, John Fuchs, Carlisle, plus 1 or 2 of the pros that we've got in the gym. Them 3 guys, they all started with me as amateurs. They all went through the pro career, retired, and we're still absolutely brilliant, good friends. I class all 3 of them, Carl, John, Jez, as very, very good friends. Jez has texted me tonight. Jez brings both his boys to train at the gym, and he leaves them. What he does, he brings them to the kids' class. He's got one kid who's 6, the other's about 8, and he just leaves them. And this is a guy who could have an input, who could, as an ex-pro, ex-amateur, ex-area champion, good fighter, who I'd welcome in the gym to help me train them. But what he does, he brings the kids, drops them off, comes back and picks them up in an hour. He doesn't tell me what to do. And I thought, you know, what a great testament for a guy to do that with his kids. You know, brings his kids for me to train, just like I trained him. So yeah, there is a lot of unloyalty in this game, but there's also a lot of guys that are 100% loyal. And like I said, I've probably missed a lot of guys out in our gym, but I've got a board, I've got pictures in the gym of all the guys who trained at our gym. Not necessarily Errol Graham and Paul Jones and Richie Wenton and Clinton Woods, not them guys. I've got pictures of all the guys who've gone through the ranks, you know, to achieve things. Tommy Frank, you know, gone from well, his first fight was when he was 11, gone through the amateurs, lost to another kid in Sheffield, I think on 3 occasions, lost to the Mexican kid twice, and then still went on to win the British title. You know, so they're the success stories, you know, stories like that where fighters have had to come back from losses. We can all look good when you're winning. We can all look, you know, most fighters can look good when they're on top. But to me, a great fighter is somebody who comes back from a crushing defeat, not necessarily a knockout defeat, but you know, a damaging defeat, and comes back and you know, carries on. Like you just said earlier, your Muhammad Ali. You know, Muhammad Ali got beat by Joe Frazier, but he didn't start blaming anybody. The canvas were too loose, or the ropes were too loose, or, you know, he took it on the chin, and he come back and went on to be the greatest fighter ever. But like I said, these days, problem with fighters is what they do. They get beat, and it's pointing the finger, it's your fault or it's his fault. And it's a sad state of affairs, but that's just the way boxing is at the moment.
No, it's a shame. Obviously, I enjoy the history of boxing, and yeah, let's hope we can see a different, you know, we can see a change to boxing in future. I don't want to take your time up too much, Glenn, so I appreciate your time. I've always got time to speak to you in future.
I'm all right. Listen, I'm all right. Listen, I'm fine. This is my chilling out time. I've been to the gym this morning. Finish every night at 8 o'clock. The gym will pack tonight, which is great. Coming off the last 2 years that we've had, you know, I know gyms that have actually gone under because obviously, you know, COVID and gyms getting shut down and so on and so on. And the other thing, what you've got to remember about a lot of these gyms up and down the country, you know, here in Sheffield, we've got the EIS, which is like a brilliant place for fighters to train. But up and down this country, there's people like me go to the gym week after week, month after month, and train kids. Not necessarily kids who are becoming champions, but you know, these are some of the guys who don't get the don't get the credit. You know, we all know these great so-called trainers that are around at the moment, and they've trained fighters that somebody else has produced from an 11-year-old kid. But there's a lot of people in this country, up and down this country, who go to gyms like mine, you know, smelly old little school hall, training kids week after week after week, and don't get the credit. So, you know, I'd like to say to them guys, you know, 10 out of 10, keep doing what you're doing. If I can just finish on a very sad note, today I found out that a great trainer, one of the trainers that I just spoke about, a guy called Brian Hughes from Manchester. Brian was a great boxing figure. I boxed a couple of his kids. I boxed a kid called Lance Williams, who was a great fighter, boxing twice. Brian Hughes was a great boxing figure in Manchester. And it's very, very sad to find out today that Brian has sadly died.
I heard about that. I saw that on Twitter. And yes, I'm sorry to hear that. But, you know, I've always got time to talk to you, and I'll definitely visit your gym this year if you've got time.
Yeah, come up, have a look around. Yeah, we're doing good. Like I said, now the things are slowly getting back to normal. You know, we went through that period like a lot of gyms did, where you couldn't have general public in. You know, but because we've got professionals and a couple of kids who box on the England team, we were still allowed to open. So luckily for me, I kept my sanity through it, because if I'd not been able to go to the gym through lockdown, I'd have been cracking up. But, you know, I know a lot of gyms that had to actually close, and a lot of other gyms, a lot of amateur gyms in this town, they survive on, you know, putting shows on and kids paying the subs. They don't get no funding and things like that. So what happened is, it's been horrendous for them in the last 2 years, because, you know, they've had no kids coming in. So obviously bills are not getting paid. And it's sad that, you know, you see a once thriving gym, because of COVID, you know, it's got shut down. It's very, very sad. So I'm glad that things are getting back to relative normality. Kids are coming back in the gym. My gym is busy as it always has been. So we're all right. I just hope everybody else who's got gyms can manage to bounce back from this. Now we're getting back to some level of normality, and hopefully, you know, just go from strength to strength.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I wish you all the best with that. And it's been a pleasure listening to what you have to say, Glyn.
Anytime. And like I say, when you're around, if you're ever in Sheffield, pop up and see us, and pop into the gym and see what we do. And I'll speak to you again soon.
I promise I will. I'll be in touch.
Yeah, no problem. But no getting in with my guys and trying to stick it on them with a big right hand.
No, you are. I'll send you the video.
Go on. Speak to you later.
I promise. I'll be in touch, Glyn. Take care.
All right, pal. I'll see you later.